Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, one and all, and welcome to another edition of the Smoking Barrel. I'm Rustin Edwards, based in Geneva, with my illustrious, well-suited co-host, Mr. Matt Stanley, based in Dubai. And no,
Yeah.
the shirts were not planned.
No, we need to get some smoking barrel shirts made, don't we? So people buy some merch. TSB
Yeah.
merch. Yeah, greetings all. Been a couple of weeks, but yeah, I'm a little jaded after watching a very tense football match last night between Arsenal and West Ham. And let's just say there are some West Ham fans who are mates who aren't answering my phone calls this morning. There was a very tense VAR, the video assistant referee, disallowing an equaliser in the 98th minute, whatever it was. It was tense, and I was like, "Look, if I'd have been on the other end of that decision, I'd be equally as upset." But it was a foul. It was a foul. Let's just leave it at that. Anyway, enough about football. We've still got time to choke, so I don't want to dwell on that too much. But yeah, all okay. I mean, the 11th of May. The kids are back at school this morning. They were off last week because we unfortunately saw some missile alerts came back, which was an alarm that was coming off on people's phones that I thought was had ended. So that's why we didn't get anything out last week because I had three very beautiful, busy children to look after as well as juggling work and an anxious household. So they're back in today. There are still drones being intercepted and no missiles, but drones yesterday too in not sure where. There's been usually the authorities here, which have done an amazing job, are quite candid on where those what has been intercepted, why the defense alerts have gone off. Haven't had any alerts, and there's no location details on where the drones are being intercepted, but it does look like things have pushed out to the strait. So the naval blockade is working. And Fujairah unfortunately got hit again last week. Details on that are sketchy. And Ras Al Khaimah, there was some, which is on the coast as well. There was some activity. But that's a quick update here. How are you, Edwards?
Fair to Midland here in the middle of Europe with nothing well to report. Markets are where they're at. I mean, as said to a friend of mine today, oh, it must be Monday. We had a peace deal that's been declined, and ships hit in the Persian Gulf, and crude's up.
Yes, it does seem to be a common theme on a Monday, doesn't it? That we hear what's happening in markets. Look, this was flat price up 344. Can you see that yet as that comes through the screens?
It's coming in here in a moment.
Come on, come on. There we go. So look, here we are with front month crude. July is a month now. Market's still heavily backwardated here. July
Oh,
SEP, I think we spoke about that the other week. What's that? $11, something like that right now. 104.66, high of the day, just under 106, 105.99. So we're a buck 30 off the highs that we've seen so far today. Gas oil, $1,200 a ton, but I think May expires tomorrow.
yeah, I believe it does go off the board either today or tomorrow.
Yeah, so this volumes are lower than June, but it's still that spread I think will come in today. Um, yeah, I mean, look, what's that? Still about 165 bucks a barrel for diesel delivered into Europe. I mean, look, up 350 reasons. I mean, like you just said, it's Monday morning. There was supposed to be a peace deal. Markets have sold off from the highs that we saw. Well, where are we? Let me just share my screen again. Sorry, so you can see what I'm talking about here. This is the history of Brent here. So you can see that vast majority. I mean, April. Where were we this time last month? 11th of April, $95. We're obviously about $10 higher than that, and Brent has remained above 100 since the 22nd of April, more or less. And it simply is because there is still no oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. There is a big energy crisis on the horizon. The longer it goes on, the worse that problem gets. We'll talk about that in more detail in a moment, and some of the stuff that the guys have written. Um, but this peace deal that people just assumed would be kind of in place now. We're in the 11th week of the conflict. It seems quite a way off. Do you agree?
I would fully agree with that because you've got what the Iranians want and what the U.S. wants. They're both that from everything that's been seen, I've seen in the news and in the press is basically they just keep reiterating the same positions that they had at the beginning of any peace talks. So there is no, it doesn't seem like there's any movement to a middle ground position. It seems like the Iranians are stuck on what they want, the U.S. is stuck on what they want
Yeah.
and there's just no compromise coming from either side. So it's very trying to think what's the word here, but it's very polarized responses.
Impasse. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a complete diplomatic impasse. And so with that, okay, granted they haven't gone, we haven't gone back to full kinetic activity. We're bombing on Iran and indiscriminate missile strikes against GCC nations, thank God.
Yeah.
But that could happen at a moment's notice for all we can see.
Yeah. Well, it did last Monday, right? So there was two cruise missiles, four ballistic missiles. Fortunately, it's not over our heads, but it doesn't mean that it's not, it's not worrying. And a lot of people, I think there's a whole new podcast that we could talk about, the future of the Middle East and Dubai. And look, we were talking about it before we came on. My kids were born here. It's a hell of an upheaval to sort of say we're going to leave. We don't want to leave. We're invested here heavily, and we love it here. But I think a lot of the anti-Dubai narrative has kind of gone. I actually responded to someone on LinkedIn yesterday, politely told him he was talking shit. Um, but I think, those who are here and are invested and kids go to school and jobs are centered around the economy here, would stay. But I do think the tourist isn't coming in. That's just, I mean, why would you? Well, apart from to enjoy everything, it's not that bad here. But those who are looking to move over, I don't think will now. I mean, if we're in a position where, I was working in London and then I had an option to come here, I would have bitten your hand off 6 months ago. But now I don't think we would because, and I think a lot of people will feel the same. That is going to be a problem economically. And GDP is still looking okay because the government is spending a lot. So when the government are kind of there to, rightly so, there's big investment infrastructure projects like there's a new subway system they're going to put in called the Gold Line or something, which will link up with existing infrastructure, train lines, etc. So the government to keep, but it just we're approaching summer as well, so a lot of people leave, but it's going to be a challenging time for the Middle East. The economies in the Middle East, it's going to be tough, regardless of oil prices nearly doubled where they were because exports are still so much down, so down.
Well, and when you think of the GCC nations, I mean, the only ones that can have any real benefit of the current price environment is the UAE and Saudi Arabia because they have the export pipelines. Right?
Yeah,
At least get some volume out and capture some of the revenue. I mean, if you look at the earnings from Aramco from Q1, they had a fairly good Q1, and that's just because they could capture that March rally with the exports out of Yanbu. And I'm sure if you look at ADNOC, they probably would have a similar type of story because of their exports out of Fujairah.
yeah,
But
yeah,
all the other GCC nations that have no pipeline export capacity to speak of, they're going to be suffering without having the cash coming in. And that's going to be the big issue that's going to hit the GCC probably in a few more months. They probably have enough cash reserves to keep going for the time being, but it will become a hard number to top about probably in another 45, 60 days.
yeah, yeah, and that's the concern, isn't it? Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain. They need the income. They really do. And you're right, you said cash reserves are there. But I heard last week that SOMO, the state oil company of Iraq, were offering their crude at like minus $35 discounts for those who can come and pick it up on an FOB and get it through the strait. So there is this sort of, that number is essentially where flat price was trading a few months ago. So I think if they're happy with those numbers pre-conflict, they'll offer that as a discount, and then hopefully people can come into the strait. But simply put, it's just not safe. I mean, look, you've been at sea for a number of years. Like everyone's saying, well, you got the naval blockade. The US military have degraded the Iranian military capabilities to a point where They can put the blockade in place, which is why it wasn't done in the first place. You mentioned that the other week. Why aren't, if there's a US Navy blockade, Iran's military capabilities is downgraded, then why aren't ships going through the strait? It's simply, and insurance cover is available, and people are doing it at like 5, 6% cargo values, which is mad.
Yep.
But as a seafarer, if you got orders from your own, from the owners of your company to go through the strait, and that there was a danger, what do you do?
Well, I mean, first off, as ship's master, I mean, you've got, the captain of the ship. You have an ultimate responsibility for the safety of the ship, safety of the cargo, safety of the crew.
Right,
And so if somebody in home office somewhere else says, transit an active war zone, and you don't think you're safe to do so, you have a duty to say, nope, not going to do it.
really.
Yeah,
Regardless what the chairman sitting
yeah.
in his office drinking claret says.
Yes, because yeah, he's in his office drinking claret, and you're going to be the guy dodging the bullets. And I think even with the downgrade that it's happened, you still have the IRGC still has the capacity and the capability to strike a ship. So it doesn't mean that okay, one or two ships get through. It's the third or fourth or fifth ship that gets hit trying to go through
Yeah.
is what everybody's afraid of. That's why you don't have the bum rush for the exit that you think you should have because nobody wants to get out. They don't want to put themselves at that type of risk.
Yeah, I mean, look, just on that, my colleague Florian, on when was it? Did it come out over the weekend? Friday. Let me just share this with you. So this is the value of cargoes that are on the water that are locked into the Middle East Gulf. So that's crude products, LNG and LPG trapped in the Middle East Gulf rises to 20 billion. That's not, I'll get onto another article we put together. This is Middle East Gulf. So anything from the Strait of Hormuz up to Iraq, essentially. Look at this. It's how many barrels is it? I'll get onto this bit in a moment, but look, you can see. So crude accounts for 75% of the total value of crude, of all liquids that are in the Middle East Gulf. You can see
They're
what that
currently
is.
stuck on the water.
Yeah. So yeah, correct. There's always cargoes on the water because ships are moving from Basra or wherever it might be, or Min Al Abdullah or Kuwait, through to Strait of Hormuz. There's always cargoes on the water, but this is Jan to Feb average when pre-conflict. So now you've got this because the ship simply can't move. Fuel oils, clean cargo, LPG, LNG, LPG and ammonia down here, and then LNG. That's not accounting for, dry cargo, containers. That is a lot of oil because you said 20 billion doesn't sound enough, but that's on the water because simply put, crude can't go places at the moment. We heard the Iranians are apparently trying to fill up everything they can, floating in storage because they can't get their oil out. And there's only so many ships, only so many tanks that they can utilize. But if you look at how much production has been lost, let me show you this one. Um, Here, running out of barrels. So this is Johannes, my colleague Johannes. Now, I remember showing you this when the conflict first started, I think on the first day or second day we put this chart together. That was here. And everyone was kind of thinking, well, maybe it's a month and we'll be here. That's recoverable. But it's not. We're here now. And we're close to 1 billion barrels that could be reached by the end of this month. At the moment, we're at 782 million barrels of crude and condensate supply losses. And the CEO, Amin Nasser of Saudi Aramco, said the same thing yesterday. Even
So,
if Strait is open, it's going to take months for things to normalize.
so just that does not include any of the refined products that are missing from the global market because again, you have a lot of refining capacity that's been
Correct.
locked in because they can't export to the global markets either. So you think of all the Kuwaiti refineries, the Bahraini refineries, the Saudi refineries. So we're probably getting close to 1 billion barrels already of total.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, that's probably fair to say, including everything. And what happens is, if eventually there won't be enough vessels. I'd imagine we're probably near that point. ballast vessels that are waiting around to load something.
Yeah, I
Then
mean, once you get vessels repositioning to go somewhere else to load cargo, you're out of cycle and you're 90 days away from getting a ship back in. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about the conga line of vessels going into the U.S. Gulf Coast to load, and I think you guys had an article on that one as well. The amount of the U.S. becoming the supplier of last resort.
yes, yeah, that was my
And
colleague Michelle. Yeah,
when you think of all those ships going into the U.S. Gulf Coast to load, and if they go on the U.S. Gulf Coast to Asia routing, they're
yeah.
right now looking at 30 days to go from the Persian Gulf to the U.S. Gulf Coast. You load, and then you've got another 50 days to go back. So by the time you get done discharging, you're 80 days from now.
Yeah.
And then you have to get back. So you're talking a good 90 days from that ship, once it loads in the U.S. Gulf Coast, getting back into position to load in the Persian Gulf if everything opened up.
Yeah, this is the thing, isn't it? And you know, how does it work then? Let's say you own a refinery and you can't you're at tank tops because you can't get the product out of the when the crude is cracked and then the molecules turn into naphtha, gasoline, whatever. That goes into a tank, a storage tank, and then a ship comes alongside and loads it and then it goes in its way. But
Yeah.
once all the vessels are used up and they're floating in storage in the Middle East Gulf, like Flo was mentioned earlier on, then the tanks are full at the location. So what then has to happen? You then
Well,
reduce capacity on the refinery.
no, you have to cut runs, and it's not necessarily you become beholden to the most critical path of production, which is what is your least usable product that you're going to produce when running your crude to make retail fuel for the local market. And we
Okay, say
start
that again. Say that again.
So your critical path of production becomes your least marketable good that you produce when you're running. Because when you run a refinery, you're producing a whole bunch of stuff. You're producing
Yeah.
BPX, butylene, toluene, xylenes. You're producing asphalts. You're producing fuel oil, naphthas, finished grade gasoline, finished grade diesel, finished grade jet fuel. And yeah, and that's pretty much a big top end thing. Plus, you have all secondary products you might produce, such as VGOs,
Yeah.
straight runs, lube oils, what have you. So
Yeah.
if you can't get your least usable local product out of your refinery, you fill up those tanks. And when those tanks fill up, you have to stop operations. So you have to
Okay.
manage those, the worst products you produce, you have to manage those to the point where you can at least keep running to keep your local market supplied, or you have to start downgrading quality of fuel in order to absorb those molecules in.
Right. So So if you're talking about domestic consumption, say in the UAE, Ruwais, right? I think that can supply the vast majority of domestic consumption quite easily. So then you reduce it down to say 50%. That's not just someone in one of these big, I would imagine, like control rooms just going, I'll just turn the dial down to five. It's a much more complex process than that. If you've got to shut down particular units, that's a big job, isn't it? Closure of
Yeah, it
refinery.
is because yeah, you have to keep things in thermal balance. You have to keep things proper, and you still have to maintain that you have enough storage to create. Because when you shut down a processing unit, you basically are now going longer that feedstock that feeds that processing unit. And then what do you do
Right.
with that barrel? Because when you think of how a crude unit runs or a refinery runs, you have an atmospheric column, which is your initial cutting, which splits your molecule up into the different grades.
Yeah.
And these are your straight run products. There's no secondary processing done to these products yet. And then from that point, they go to secondary processing, which either could be like for the resids, they go into a vacuum distillation unit, which then uses vacuum to cut more light end products out if you're that type of refinery, or you go to an RFCC, which uses a catalyst to cut the straight run material fuel oil into different cuts, which I think that's what Ruiz has. It goes to the RFCC.
This is chemistry, people.
It's petroengineering.
There you go. This is chemistry. Don't say the smoking barrel doesn't tell you anything, teach you anything. Like, comment, subscribe.
But
Sorry, go on.
but as you get to those cut points and you start topping up your tanks with those feedstocks, you end up in a position where you can't run as much crude as you'd like to run because you just can't put it anywhere. You run out of places to put the products.
So let's say, for example, you produce a lot of naphtha. Naphtha can only go to so many places, pet chem feed if it's got the right, the right parameters and it's the right spec. And then you've got something can go into the gasoline blend pool. But let's say okay, you've got too much naphtha, it can't go anywhere. So we're gonna have to reduce runs. If you've got a direct fed refinery like Ruwais, I don't know the configuration, but I know I can get it. But um, that's not easy either because then you're talking about the amount you're drilling or producing, that's got to be closed down as well.
Well, yeah, that's all that it starts to back up the entire system. So as soon as you start losing your refining capacity because you have to cut runs, you have to cut back on production because you're not needing all that crude. So if you can't export the crude, then it scales in your production cut.
And that's not an easy thing either, is it? That's not
No,
just like again turning it down to 5 instead of 10 or whatever you're going to do. That's a big process as well.
it's a big process, at least the benefit that they have as being, it can be a controlled process where, the likelihood of recovery is great. What you'd never ever want to have with any type of refinery or oil production is a crash stop, where, like, for instance, if your refinery gets hit by a drone, right? I hate to say that, but say if that happens, like it has happened already, and you have to
Yeah.
shut down your entire plant, like, hit the emergency stop button.
Right.
You do a lot more damage versus a controlled slow down, shut
Right.
down. And same thing with with an oil well. If you have an oil well and you just crash stop the oil well, you'll do more damage to the production than you would if you have a nice gradual reduction in production.
Okay, gotcha. So it's okay. And then the likelihood of because I remember this conversation coming up when Russia were talking about because they were in a similar position a few years ago, and they had to then shut down some of the production wells in, say, Urals. And in the winter, that's really difficult to do. But it's how do they then recover it once production can increase again? That's a whole engineering thing. And if you haven't got the infrastructure, and those wells are really old, that can be dangerous, right?
Well, you may not get 100% of that production back. You might get 85%, 95%, 70%. It just really depends on, what's gone on with the strata, what's gone on with the pressure inside the well, what type of pressurization is being used. Is it natural wellhead pressure? Are you doing some type of flooding in order to increase pressure to increase extraction? So there's a lot of nuances depending on what type of well it is, how quickly or how much more you can recover after you shut it in.
Okay.
But you got to remember though, the people who are in, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, they're experienced oil engineers. They're not just, winging it left and right. They know what they're
No, no,
doing.
no, sure. Yeah, no, no,
Uh,
I agree. I mean, I saw a stat the other day, it was quite frightening. So in February, Kuwait oil exports were 2.6 million barrels. Then they went down to 1.5 million barrels a day in March. And last month, they were 600,000 barrels. And that's the lowest since the Gulf War in 1991. So that's a pretty frightening metric. And I'd imagine that's probably domestic consumption.
I would assume that's probably keeping the refineries running at that point.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, look. I think there's lots of talk about this, and there has been lots of talk, but we seem to be in an environment where we're above 100, 104.63 at time of writing, up 335 in a day, but we're not at 200.
No.
And what is the reason? Is that we're seeing demand destruction? People are ignorant. There's
So
what,
there's
what's going on?
there's a lot of reasons why the markets are a bit more benign in pricing than all of the predictions were. I mean,
Right.
if you even think of like here in Europe, we've been, the headlines of Europe's going to run out of jet fuel in 6 weeks, 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Those headlines keep percolating, yet Europe is yet to run out of jet fuel.
Yeah.
Uh, and when you actually look at the physical markets today, there is plenty of material available in the physical markets. It's a function of price, yes, it is. Function of premium, yes, it is. But there are a lot of molecules available, and you've had a lot of moves that have been done by different jurisdictions in order to help ease the supply crunch. So, for instance, um, like Australia and New Zealand increased the sulfur limit in their gasoline just to keep their systems wet. So, the thing that everybody has to remember, we operate currently in the world where we have very strict regulations on the qualities of the fuels that are available for the consumers in the market,
Right.
which those qualities require, different types of crudes, better processing of the material in order to make the finished goods, which we all consume in our cars and our bikes and our trucks and what have you. Now, with that in mind, you have regional differences in grades of fuel. Like for instance, jet fuel. You have three different qualities of jet fuel that run around the market. Jet's not all the same grade. You have Jet A1, you have
Yeah.
Jet Bird, and you have Jet A, which is the U.S. grade. And then you have the military grades, which we're not going to get into. But nevertheless, Europe has now said, okay, we'll allow U.S. grade jet fuel into the European system,
Right.
which helps alleviate this fight because the US is long jet, Europe is short jet, but they're two different grades of jet fuel.
Yeah.
And there are nuances. It's basically at what freeze point the jet sits at. I think Jet A1 is like 47 C, Jet A is 40 minus 40 C. So is that 7-degree difference in freeze point going to cause a problem or not? Probably
Yeah.
not, since all the American jets fly on Jet A, European jets fly on Jet A1. Um, and there's some other
Yeah.
traceability requirements that have to be taken into consideration as well. But nevertheless, when you have these, governments doing things to alleviate the supply crunch, it's actually starting to hit the supply and make it all become less problematic. Now, I think you also have to couple that with demand destruction that has happened. I've seen numbers where, for instance, China has cut runs to almost 20%,
Yeah.
which has alleviated, it creates a supply side problem, but it also reduces Chinese demand for crude.
Yeah.
And now we've got crude oil overhangs in West Africa. You got crude oil overhangs in the Mediterranean. And couple that with all the SPR releases, currently here in the front, there is a swelling of product.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, just on that, I'm just looking here at UK monthly imports of jet and kerosene. Okay, just let me pick it what you were just mentioning, what you were talking about. I had the Guardian paper in the UK call me last Monday, and they were like, "Oh, we're going to run out of jet fuel," and I said, "What do you mean?" No, we're not. And they went, "Okay, well, we're not getting anything from the Middle East, and that's a real problem." I said, "Yes, but people will step in, and we'll take, like you said, the UK is not going to run out of jet fuel." Well, the famous last words. Look at what the US have done in April. We're the biggest supplier of 770,000 tons of Jet A1 kerosene. 386 came from the US. April last year, how much came from the US? 39,000 tons. So it's 10 times more jet fuel. And like you said, is it more expensive? Yes, it is. Will people not fly as much? I think the system will become more efficient than it, and that was probably needed. But people are benefiting from this, aren't they? And that's what Michelle's article was really good. The US is there as a supplier. Is it expensive? Yes, but it's there. And a lot of people are starting to panic. But the Guardian didn't run a story on it in the end because gave them the data and they went, actually, there's not a story here, is there? Because what are you going to say? Breaking news: jet fuel supplies are steady.
Well,
No
but
one's going to read
I
that.
think that's actually what should be done because
Well, yeah, it
I think
doesn't.
there's
It
a
doesn't
lot of fear
sell.
mongering being thrown out in the marketplace, which should be because it's one thing when you have the CEO of Vitol saying, "Oh my God, we're short 1 billion barrels of oil."
Yeah.
Yet you have this front end of the market which is well supplied.
Yeah.
So
Actually, let me have a look at that. Just yeah, go on. Sorry, mate.
So
Um,
are we really that short now? No, but it's a projected shortfall that's going to happen based on forward demand assumptions and forward supply assumptions.
yeah, absolutely. Look, this is our oil inventories product. So you can see where I've gone back 2 years here. So Jan 2025, look, 3.46 billion barrels of oil. I don't remember people panicking about oil inventories then. and now we're at 3.6 billion barrels of oil. We were up here, and this is when everyone was talking about the glut that's going to end all gluts. Do you remember? That's
Hmm.
what we could talk about Q4 last year. Let's go commodities on the water as well, and then you can break that down by tank type. So, I mean, it's pretty steady, isn't it? I mean, yeah, look, it's lower than it was in March, but floating storage, 120, 140 million. I think, that's obviously cargoes on the water right now in the Middle East Gulf. Oil in transit on ships, that's our methodology. How often do you go from floating storage to oil on ships? That's been questioned quite recently. But, we're roughly we're 4.8 billion barrels of crude inventories right now. If I go back to where we were this time last year, 4.7. And where are we now? 4.8, it looks like. So there's a lot of oil. The thing is, inventories largely doesn't matter because if it's not in the right place, it doesn't matter if you've got oil somewhere. It
Well, it's
has to
not,
balance, right?
and so that's part of the other issue is that you have shortfalls in certain marketplaces. But even then, what's secure for high prices and shortfall? High prices.
Yeah,
People don't drive, people don't run their trucks, and yeah, it does impact the GDP of these countries. And unfortunately, that is pushed more on lower income nations than it is on higher income nations. And I think we see this, like you see it with stories around Vietnam and Cambodia, Laos, all having supply crunch issues because they can't get enough oil in because it's too expensive and there are subsidies and yada yada yada. Yet,
yeah,
yeah, and in the U.S. you have people bemoaning, "Oh my God, I'm paying $4 a gallon for gasoline, $5 a gallon for gasoline." However, people also seem to forget, back between 2000 and what I think 2010 and 2020, markets were averaging around 108 to $110 a barrel for crude.
yeah. And
Gasoline
that's what,
prices.
yeah, that's something that Michelle covered actually in this. Let me just show you that so you can see. Whoops, hang on. You've gone full screen on me. One sec. Getting too excited with all my graphs. Um, Yeah, look, let's go down here to the bottom piece here. Um, US gasoline, US retail gasoline. So yeah, look, it's high. It's as high as it's been since the Russia invasion of Ukraine. COVID, it was down here just at what, a buck 75 a gallon. Now we're at $4.50. We were up here at $5. So it's high. And look, this is an issue here. But you know, the system in the US is also benefiting because they're selling lots of jet fuel to places like the UK. So it's and gasoline and well, not gasoline because the UK actually doesn't need as much of that, but diesel, especially middle distillates, the US has done very well. And the crack, I don't even know where the 321 crack is right now. $55, something like that. Um,
Well, you also have the
52
benefits of the U.S. being able to export LNG, exporting crude oil. I mean, so, the U.S. is the net winner in all this because, yeah, they're the supplier of last resort across the barrel.
Yeah,
And so therefore, with that, okay, yeah, there's a lot of buying. But again, from a, how squeezed is the market? It's not squeezed yet. And I see this with a lot of things going on now. What else has happened outside of just the Middle East? Okay, we had the Ukrainians still hitting Russian export infrastructure, which has had an impact. There's been the flare up of hostilities in Libya over the weekend,
yeah,
which has caused a bit of a shortfall, or at least they haven't called it a force majeure yet, but it sounds like it's a force majeure.
yeah. Sevilla's down, isn't it? 120,000 barrels a day.
Well,
Yeah.
that's just the refinery, but they've halted all exports of crude from those ports.
Oh, is it? Okay, okay.
So so that's going to contribute to drawing down some of this overhang that's sitting in the marketplace. But I would say that if things carry on in the Persian Gulf like they've been carried on, we might see more demand destruction than what we're thinking about today, which actually pushes us back to maybe, where the shortfall is only 1 million barrels a day, not 10
Yeah.
million.
Uh, just before we go, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson says Iran's proposal to the US was not excessive. The US continues to have unreasonable demands. That's where we are, people. We're in the middle of deadlock. Project Freedom didn't work. The blockade is nothing's coming out. No confirmed Iranian tanker. It is a matter of time. It does seem like which side is going to yield first. I cannot see either one doing that yet. It does need a proper broker, not me, but Pakistan need to get in there. But look, I think we go a bit higher on flat price, but I think that demand destruction continues. Modi, Prime Minister of India, said there should be a lot more working from home, not to use fuel. So I think that that will continue to happen east of Suez.
Well, and that's actually something, I know we're trying to wrap up here, but that's one of the things that our technology today gives us the ability to work from home, where if this happened 10 years ago, 15
Yeah,
years ago,
yeah,
things would be a far more dramatic. But because we've got more alternative fuel vehicles that are in the mix across the European, Asian, and US markets, we've got the ability to work from home, and we've got that post-COVID rationality that working from home is not a bad thing.
yeah.
Like I said, we can end up where we end up in a balanced market because people start working from home more.
Yeah, I mean, look, Kepler have always been, everyone works from home. There is an office for those who want to go in there, and people do. But it's, I'm in a fortunate position where I do work from home. My wife does as well. We don't get on each other's nerves. It's because I keep this door closed, to be honest, and a big sign on the outside that says "Keep out," like I'm a teenager in the bedroom. But no, it is. I think the people adapt very quickly, and technology allows us to. That's a very good point. We didn't get to talk about Chinese car manufacturing down 21%. We'll get another episode out later this week, and we'll talk about that all that, shall we? And give people an update. But I
Well,
think
I
we
mean,
can yeah we can
the hidden story behind the Chinese story is the fact inflation is starting to tick up.
yeah. Well, let's cover that. What's going to happen with interest rates and who's making money, who's not, and when Emirates called me the other day and asked me where I was because I haven't flown for about 3 weeks. So we'll see. But anyway, stay safe. Like, comment, subscribe, and you can
Yep.
wrap up, Edwards.
Yep. All right. Well, click like, comment, and subscribe. We look forward to talking to you all again. Tune into the Smoking Barrel. Out.
Ciao.